Hi, I'm Elayne Landwehr. I am a member of League of Women Voter Hastings. And today I am going to talk about the Convention of States and the League of Women Voter of the U.S. position on that. And I will share my screen. Okay, I'm going to ask that if you'll turn your microphone off, that will help me. All right, we'll begin with what is the title? Convention of States, and another name for it is Constitutional Convention. Another name for it is Article 5 Convention. So all three of those names are something that you might come in contact with when you're reading articles or information about the Convention of States. And the rest of my title is the League of Women Voters of the U.S. and their public policy position from the 2020-2022 public policy position. All right, so the outline of what I'm going to be talking about today is what is a Convention of States? The second thing is what is the history of the Convention of States? Number 3, what is some current legislation for the Convention of States? And number 4, what is the public policy position of the League of Women Voters of the U.S. on the Convention of States? So from where does the idea of a Convention of States come? Well, it comes from the U.S. Constitution. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution states 2 ways to change the Constitution of the United States. Congress may make changes or the states may make changes. Okay, and in the Constitution, it is Article 5, and this is what it says. This is it. This is all that is in the Constitution for Article 5 or for a Convention of States. It says the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution. And this part that I've underlined is the part that applies to the Convention of States. Or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress. And then the last part is not applicable to what we're talking about today. All right, so to make that a little bit easier, what did that actually mean? Well, number 1, Congress needs 2/3 approval of both houses, and then they need 3/4 of the states' legislatures or conventions to ratify it. And number 2, states, if there is a Convention of States, states need 2/3 of the states, which would be currently 34, to call a convention on a topic, and then 3/4 of the states' legislatures or conventions to ratify it. So so that's what it is. It's a way to amend the Constitution. It's in the U.S. Constitution. It's Article 5. So let's go to the history of it. So what happened at the only Convention of States or Constitutional Convention or Article 5 Convention? Some people call it CONCON as for Constitutional Convention, CON. Just so you know that when you hear it call those different names, it's basically the same thing. So what happened at the only Convention of States, the Constitutional Convention, to ever take place? According to the federal government's Office of the Historian website, and that is a really good website to go to. It's a government website with statistical and information about the government. There has only been one Convention of States, and that was the Constitutional Convention of 1787. That is when representatives from the colonies met in secret from May to September 1787 in Philadelphia, and they got rid of the Articles of Confederation and wrote the Constitution we have now, minus the amendments. Okay, I noticed I underlined met in secret. We're going to come back to that. That's going to be important. The Articles of Confederation didn't allow the federal government to collect taxes, pay off debts to foreign governments, make treaties, etc. So the founding fathers felt they needed to make drastic changes. The Constitution was ratified in 1789 after the necessary number of states ratified it. So since the US government couldn't pay off debts to foreign governments, couldn't collect taxes, couldn't make treaties, there was a need to make some changes. Since our present day Constitution was ratified in 1789, the states have never used a convention of states or a constitutional convention. So the only precedent we have is the Convention of States or Constitutional Convention that took place in 1787 in Philadelphia in secret. So 2 times the states have been close to a Convention of States. Number 1, in the 1890s, the Senate refused to take up the issue of direct election of senators. So states tried to hold a convention. They were just short of the needed number of states. That pushed Congress into passing the 17th Amendment in the 1890s, allowing the people to elect their United States senators instead of the state legislators electing them. So we don't remember that, but before 1890s, we couldn't vote for our own senators to the United States Congress. We had to, our state legislators elected them. But since there was a push to get Congress to do that, they got the 17th Amendment, and that was allowed by the Congress. And number 2, 1960s. States wanted to call a convention over a Supreme Court decision dictating how legislative districts were apportioned. But that convention never got the needed number of states to sign on. So since 1787, there has never been a convention of states, but these 2 times was where it got close. And these were the 2 subjects that came up. All right, so what's the history of who is for it and who is against it? Well, support for or against a convention of states is nonpartisan. So that's important, but the reasons for a convention differ. The conservatives supporting a convention usually want the following. They want to enforce a federal balanced budget, establish term limits for members of Congress and the Supreme Court justices. They would like to repeal the 17th Amendment that would put the selection of US senators back into the hands of the state legislatures. And they would like to eliminate government regulations. Okay, so the progressives' main reasons for supporting a convention are as follows. They would like to overturn the Citizens United campaign finance decision. Now that was a Supreme Court decision. It was Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, January 21st, 2010. Or they'd like to pass the Equal Rights Amendment, or they'd like climate change legislation, or they'd like to abolish the Electoral College. All right, so let's go on with, so what, through the years, what have been some of the concerns that people have had? Well, some of it's the lack of rules. The convention could change the Constitution in unlimited ways. The Constitution could actually be eliminated and totally rewritten as in 1787. That's our precedent, remember. The only one that we've ever had is 1787. Number 2, any number of amendments could be added or deleted. Number 3, Supreme Court decisions could be changed. Number 4, there could be outright bans on certain groups of people. And the reason I found information on this, the reason I put this in here was Michael Claremont, a constitutional law professor of Harvard University, refers to a 2009 Swiss referendum that resulted in outlawing construction of minarets, the towers found beside mosques. Now, this wasn't in the US, this was in Switzerland, but I went ahead and added it in as an example. Number 5, Would a state delegate or delegates to the convention be chosen or elected? And who would choose or elect them? And how long would they serve? And how could they be removed? Going on with concerns that people have had throughout the years, how many delegates would there be from each state? Would states be represented equally? Could the convention meet in secret as in 1787? Would the press be allowed to attend? Would there be special influence of special interest groups, meaning the wealthiest could rewrite the Constitution? Would there be legal disputes since the government would be in uncharted territory? The application process for states is uncertain. Also, state laws may not apply because the Constitution has precedents. We don't know the cost of a convention of states, so this could add to the federal deficit. Older applications or resolutions don't have to be identical to new ones, but do remain active until rescinded. Applications, resolutions, not rescinded, but passed by a state, stay on the books until rescinded. So what makes the different resolutions from different states and time periods aggregate? Okay, this is throughout the information that I've read, this is a really interesting one because I'm going to use a hypothetical example now. Let's say in 1850, a state called a resolution or an application for a convention of states, and they called for a balanced federal budget. And let's say in 1920, a different state called for a convention of states, and they asked for limited financial restraints or to a limitation of financial spending. So are those the same or are those different or are they aggregate? So that you can read hours on what would be aggregate and what wouldn't. So that's a very interesting one. Number 15, a new amendment could change the amount of states votes it would take to ratify an Article 5 convention resolution. Number 16, people are worried about that once the delegates for the convention are selected, federal law dictates their actions. So does that mean that states would lose their control? All right, there are positives to a convention. It could force Congress to move more quickly on an issue, as in the 1890s and Amendment 17. And it could get an amendment passed that would never get through Congress. A lot of people talk about government gridlock. They think it would be a way to eliminate gridlock in our US government. All right, so let's move on now to legislation. And I said current legislations. I'm using legislation from 2017 until now. There is tons and tons of legislation on this. That could just be an entire program itself. All right, so what happened in 2017? A bill was introduced in the House of Representatives that would direct the National Archives to compile all applications for an Article 5 convention. The archives thinks, they aren't sure. There's a lot of records between the late 1700s and now. So the archives thinks the highest number of states application on a single topic is 28. Now remember, now we have 50 states, so 34 would be needed because you need the 2/3. That is for the most popular topic, a balanced budget. Now, do all of those applications state a balanced budget? No, they have it in different words. So are all those aggregate? That's another question. Okay, so going on, some applications go back to the late 1700s, so may not even be relevant today. Some states have rescinded or gotten rid of their resolutions that call for a convention in fear of a runaway convention. In 2019, according to the National Archives, so keep in mind, legislation was made for this in 2017, and it took 2 years for them to get all the information gathered. In 2019, according to the National Archives, there were 437 applications still in effect, dating back to 1788, including 10 from Nebraska. Now, the archives states that there were 10 from Nebraska. We're going to get to new legislation in 2019 with Carol Blood District number 3, where when her Nebraska research, by going through the Nebraska legislative information, they came up with 11. So there is discrepancy there, and I do not know which is correct. All right, so February 2019 at the 106th Nebraska legislature, some states have rescinded their pending applications to Congress requesting a convention of states under Article 5 of the Constitution. In 2019, Nebraska Senator Carol Blood, District number 3 of Bellevue, brought forth Legislative Resolution 2 to nullify Nebraska's applications going back to 1893, following the lead of Delaware, Oregon, Nevada, and New Mexico. This would have given Nebraska lawmakers a clean slate. Nebraska's applications range from how we choose U.S. senators to banning polygamy. Now, in 2019, this bill was indefinitely postponed. It never went on. So all of Nebraska's applications for a constitutional convention are still valid. All right, so District number 33, Senator Steve Halloran's legislation for the 107th legislature. And I will mention that he's had this in the 105th legislature in 2017. He had it in the 106th legislature in 2019, and he has brought forth both these bills again for the 107th legislature in 2021. Okay, LR 14. This resolution asks for a convention of states for the following 3 reasons. Number 1, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. Number 2, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. And number 3, limit the terms of office for its officials and for members of Congress. So this resolution, and this is the resolution, I took this straight from the resolution. This resolution seems broad. Which fiscal restraints, what power and jurisdiction, and terms of office for which officials. Now, this last paragraph was just trying to explain how some people might see that those 3 were broad. All right, now Senator Halloran has also brought forth legislation in the 107th legislature 2021, and it's Legislative Bill 195. This bill is to provide the rules and procedures necessary to create and guide a delegation to an Article 5 convention and provide legislative direction relating to the election and recall of a delegate or an alternate delegate, the filling of a vacancy of a delegate or an alternate delegate, and the determination of an unauthorized vote. The Committee on Committees shall nominate 1 delegate and 1 alternate delegate from each legislative caucus. This comes actually from the bill. That's from section 4, number 1. No compensation shall be given, but they will be reimbursed for their actual expenses. They are not allowed to accept gifts from any registered lobbyist. That's from section number 1, 2, and 3. They must take an oath in section number 6. And the Nebraska legislature may amend the instructions at any time. Now, the Committee on Committees nominates the delegate or delegates. We don't know how many as of yet because a convention hasn't been called. And but then the legislature, according to this bill, which has not passed, they would be voted on by the legislature. All right, so who controls the delegate? Well, the executive board of the legislature and the lieutenant governor, according to this bill, this is all according to this bill that has not passed, would be the advisory committee for the delegates and alternate delegates. If the advisory committee has a tie vote, the lieutenant governor will break the vote. 6 or more members of the advisory committee shall determine that the vote is an unauthorized vote. So if there were a convention and if this legislation was the legislation we were using from Nebraska, if the delegate voted in a way that the advisory committee or the executive board of the legislature didn't like, they could vote that that would be an unauthorized vote, so it wouldn't count. If the legislature is convened in regular or special session, the advisory committee shall not take any action. So anytime the legislature is in session, whether it be regular or special, they would control and make the decisions. But remember, this legislation has not been passed. The Nebraska has no rules for delegates, how to get delegates. It has no rules on how to rescind delegates or anything like that. Okay, so there are groups that lobby for and against both sides. And I found I could have had pages of groups lobbying for and against the sides. And I picked these four for specific reasons, and I'll share that. Number one, Mark Meckler, a Tea Party leader from Texas, heads Citizens for Self-Governance, which runs the Convention of States project calling for an Article 5 convention. He came to Nebraska on February 1st, 2019, and testified in favor of District 33 Senator Steve Halloran's LR7. And the reason I put this in is because I watch a lot of legislative hearings and I read a lot of legislative hearings. And this really hit me that if I don't give my opinions to senators, our legislature in Nebraska, people from other states will. And so please remember that people from other states can come and testify at hearings in our Nebraska legislature and give their opinions. So that just kind of spurred me to, on not just this topic, but other topics, to give my opinion. Number two, the American Legislative Exchange Council is a proponent. And but there are opponents as well. The group Common Cause is fighting against calling a convention. And I thought President Karen Hoverty Flynn said, and I really liked this quote, "This is the most dangerous idea in American politics that most people know nothing about." And I really liked the part where she said, "know nothing about," because until Senator Halloran brought forth his legislation in 2017, I really didn't know that the Convention of States existed. And I didn't know what it was about. And most people that I talk to say, "What is that? I didn't know we had that. Where is that in the Constitution?" And so I think that people know nothing about. I thought that was interesting. And I also found lots of quotes from just individual people, especially Supreme Court justices. And so number four is former Justice of the Supreme Court from 1986 to 2016, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. He said, "I certainly would not want a constitutional convention. WOA, who knows what would come of it?" So as I said, you can find as much stuff pro and as much stuff con as you want. And there are all kinds of groups, pro and con. All right, so how does the League of Women Voters take a position on an issue? Okay, so now we're moving on to point number 4. What about League of Women Voters? So first of all, I want to read this from our League of Women Voters website, our information. This is what how the League of Women Voters takes a stand. The League does not take a position on an issue without careful study at the local, state, and national levels. We pride ourselves in investing the time to dig deep and find the facts that will inform our members about the issues. The League of Women Voters is respected for its commitment to in-depth research, community involvement, and its 101-year history of educating voters. And so I think that's important that we start with that, and know that League of Women Voters don't just say this, that, or something else. They do literally years of research to take a position on an issue. Right now I'm on a study that the League of Women Voters of Nebraska is doing on reimagining public safety. And we have all kinds of information and interviews that we're gathering, and our focus has actually changed 3 different times in the like 8 months that we've been working on this. And we still are going to continue for like another year, because it keeps evolving. And so we literally do years of investigating before we come up with a position. And the positions continue to evolve and change. If you look in your League of Women Voter information on the website of League of Women Voter of the US or League of Women Voter of Nebraska, they keep changing and they keep adding information and changing information as issues change or as information comes to the forefront. All right, so what is the position of the League of Women Voters of the U.S. on constitutional conventions? Well, according to the League of Women Voters of the U.S. Impact on Issues, a Guide to Public Policy Positions 2020 to 2022, pages 55 and 56, they are, and this comes straight from the policy position, concerned that there are many unresolved questions about the powers and processes of an Article 5 constitutional convention. The League believes such a convention should be called only if the following conditions are in place. So they would like to, and I'm going to show you these conditions that they would like in place before a convention is called. All right, they would like it to be, it must be transparent and not conducted in secret. They would like representation must be based on population rather than one state, one vote. Since the delegates represent citizens, they should be elected by citizens or them and must be distributed by US population. Also, voting must be by delegate, not by state. Delegates from one state can have varying views and should be able to express them by individual votes. The convention must be limited to a specific topic to guard against a runaway convention. So what topic? What is a specific topic? That is interesting. That's kind of yet to be defined. Only state resolutions on a single topic count when determining if a constitutional convention should be called. And the validity of state calls for a convention must be determined by the most recent action of the state. If a state has enacted a rescission of its call, the rescission must be respected by Congress. So an example of that would be if in 1890, Nebraska had called for a balanced budget, but in 1930, Nebraska had rescinded that. The League of Women Voters would like the rescission of that to be respected. All right, going on. This is actually still in the policy. This is their concluding statement, the League of Women Voter US concluding statement, again from their public policy position, page 55 and 56. Without a clear construct, a constitutional convention would throw the country into turmoil, creating legal and political battles of great consequence to the nation's future. The and I can't, sorry, I find the, oh, excuse me. This is a power grab that would put control of our country's future into the hands of politicians and special interests. Okay, so that concludes my presentation, but I do want to share with you some of the references. As a lot of you know, I started researching this in 2017. I just keep researching and getting more and more information. Some of you have shared with me information. There just keeps being more and more information. So let's go through some of the references that I think are really good. The federal government's Office of the Historian website, Common Cause website, the Constitution of the United States, of course, is where Article 5 comes from. The Constitution of the State of Nebraska, the 107th Legislature of Nebraska, LB 195 and LR 14. The 2019 Nebraska Legislative Record on LR 7, the hearing of February 1st, 2019. The Grand Island Independent Sunday paper, November 4th, 2018, the article Past Midterms, Some Zero In on Amending Constitution by Matt Sadinsky, AP National Writer. Number 8, American Scripture by Pauline Maier. And Pauline Maier, the writings that she has done are very interesting. They are, I mean, they're nonfiction, but she has done a lot of research from Thomas Jefferson's papers and from James Madison's papers. And so she uses their, like, personal things they've written down. And so it reads more like a what's going to happen next novel instead of nonfiction. Number 9, notes of debates in the Federal Convention of 1787. Number 10, the papers of James Madison. Number 11, the papers of Thomas Jefferson. Number 12, the article in the Federal Society by Professor Nadelson. Number 13, Lincoln Journal Star, Senator makes case for clean slate, Thursday, February 7th, 2019, Section A, page 8. And number 14, the website for the Federal Election Commission, United States of America website. And of course, the League of Women Voter of Nebraska website. Look under League of Women Voter Nebraska issues, programs, and impact on issues for the 2020-2022 League of Women Voter US policies, page 55 and 56. That's where I got all the League of Women Voter information. Number 16, 2019, 106th Legislature of Nebraska for LR2. And number 17, in Article 5 of the Constitution and the Convention of States from the AMAC magazine, September-October issue, pages 58 to 62. That's the Association of Mature American Citizens, a group started in 2007. All right, so I don't need to share my screen anymore. Now we have some time for you to have questions.
I've got a question, Elayne.
Yes.
This is Barb. If there were such a convention called, what arm of the government, who administers that convention? Who takes the applications? What's the framework of the, the application process or the administration of a convention? Who does it? Who puts it on? What agency?
Well, if you read the applications, they are to either Congress or to the executive branch. So it's not really spelled out, but in the beginning, in 1787, the members of government, the legislature, the executive branch, they just kind of got together and said, we need to do something. And then they met in secret and did it. So there aren't a lot of written out policies on that.
But that'd be something probably Congress would have to make a committee or, form a committee or a standing group to actually administer that kind of convention, right?
I don't know.
So there's really no framework. It isn't like where to submit your application to, right?
Okay, and I'm really glad you used the word framework, because a lot of people that are concerned about it, they use the word framework. They say there is no framework. The framework is sparse. So when you use the word framework, that was used by a lot of people. And please remember, I am not an expert on this. This is just personal research, personal reading, and the League of Women Voter information and the studies that they have done.
Elayne, then the Supreme Court, the judiciary would have no right of review of the framework that was devised by Congress?
That's a great question.
Okay, it doesn't sound like it.
Probably not. It's all very vague, isn't it? It's all very vague. Like there's no, framework.
Elayne, where do we stand now? How many states have passed such a thing? How close are we to this horrible thing?
Well, remember that supposedly you're supposed to call a convention on a topic. Now there again, topic has not been defined. So remember we are the balanced federal budget, and there again, do all of these, we are at 28. I don't want to say the wrong number. For a balanced budget, we are at, was it 28 of 34? I'm trying to find my PowerPoint here. That's the closest we are. So, and I mean, but there could be a different topic, or there could be something else that would come up.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, I don't know that number right off the top of my
No,
head.
that's fine. I was thinking that at one time we had heard that, we were really awfully close to this happening and it was scary.
We are, when you think that there's like 8 more states that would need to call for a convention on a balanced budget, it is, it's scary for, people who would, yeah, it's 28 out of 30. Right now, the closest we are for a convention is on the topic, a balanced budget. And 28 states already have submitted calls and 34 is needed.
Wow.
So that would be the closest.
Wow.
One of the things we like to point out is, since they're calling it on a balanced budget amendment, is that I think it's roughly 40% of Nebraska state budget comes from the federal government. So we're putting a great portion of our state's revenue on the line if we allow a constitutional convention to be called on a budget issue, because that opens this up to everything, pretty much, whether we want to talk about education or we want to talk about healthcare or whatnot, everything's on the chopping block. So it could really mess with what happens in Nebraska.
There's quite an impetus to get rid of the Electoral College. But wouldn't that require either a constitutional amendment or a convention of the states to have that happen? What I'm asking is whether, with so many people being interested, and I think the League of Women Voters is in favor of abolishing the Electoral College. I could be wrong, but that's my impression.
So if you read the League of Women Voter of the US policy, they are in favor of that. But here again, the League of Women Voters is just trying, I think they're trying to be cautious. They would like to see the following conditions met before there would be a constitutional convention. And I listed those. They'd want it to be transparent. They want it to be based on votes based on population, not one vote, one state. They want delegates to represent citizens. They want the citizens to be able to vote for the delegates. I mean, they would like more guidance or more framework or more information. And they resolutions on just a single topic. And so keep that in mind. They would like a clearer framework, or they would like rules.
Kind of seems like an 18th century idea that just never was thought out very well by those guys. Somehow, you know what I mean? Like it was a thought, or, the beginning of a process that wasn't really thought out well, or, I don't know. The idea.
If you read some of the information from the founders, such as like Thomas Jefferson's information or James Madison's information, they wanted a way to control, to be able to control Congress if the need arose.
Okay.
But the colonies, back then, the colonies and the states were, they were looked at maybe as more individual or self-governed.
So this was kind of in the check and balances on Congress itself.
Originally, that was the thought. It was a check and a balance.
Like a backup on that. Interesting.
Well, and with regards to my question about judicial review, when they wrote that for the Convention of the States, there wasn't such a thing as judicial review, and there's still questions about whether it's legal and valid. So,
Well, and if you go by the quotations from many of the Supreme Court justices, they are very concerned about what would transpire or what could transpire.
Mhm.
I mean, I quoted Antonin Scalia. I picked him because he was the most conservative. And, but there are other people who have, other Supreme Court justices who have commented and have concerns.
Elayne, I do have another question concerning the status of Senator Halloran's work, his bill. Are there other senators who have signed on to that?
Yes, the hearing for both of Senator Halloran's bills, it was February 10th, and that would be for LB 195 and LR 14. The hearing was February 10th, and at the time the bill was given to the legislature in January, there were 16 people that had signed on for with Senator Halloran. That makes a total of 17. And the last I knew, 2 more senators had signed on. So that would be a total of 19.
Thank you.
Elayne, I have a question. I don't know how pertinent this is to the Convention of States, but earlier you did briefly mention the Equal Rights Amendment. I understand that not all states have ratified it. What does this have? Does this have something to do with Convention of States? You know, I had thought it was already a federal law, but I don't believe it is. Could you clarify that?
Well, the Equal Rights Amendment was never passed. And when it finally was ratified by all the states just recently, it was past the deadline. And the Supreme Court said that it was past the deadline. So no, the Equal Rights Amendment has not been passed.
Okay. Thank you.
Originally, Nebraska did support ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, but you know what? Sadly, I don't know that it would pass now in the current political climate in our legislature.
So the states have to all ratify again? It has to be start all over again?
Yeah, they would really have to start all over again. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Well, I just want to say, Elayne says she's not an expert in this, but honestly, I so appreciate all the research and the time that you've put into it. If you're not an expert, I don't know who is.
And I see in the chat that Margaret has put in a website.
That's just kind of a summary of the issue from Civic Nebraska, our position on Convention of States. It's one of the bills that we routinely oppose. For many of the problems that Elayne talked about, is it just there's no, and the league I think agrees on this, is the way it's being done. We would need structure, we would need rules, we would need it not to be a free-for-all, which is what currently could happen. We could just, it's just a free-for-all.
I do want to mention that I am on the activist committee for the League of Women Voters of Nebraska. And we are very careful whenever we are sent information and say, please, write your senators about this or that. They always ask us to write as constituents because the League of Women Voters is very careful about what they put out as positions. And it is, as I said earlier in their statement, it is studied at the local level, the state level, the US level, and it can be changed. The latest information that I have for the Convention of States from the League of Women Voters of the U.S. is January 2016. They came up with the points of what they would want included, you know, that it wouldn't be in secret. And then in the summer, in July of 2016, they came out with that last statement that I read that's on there. So there hasn't been any, and I shouldn't say there hasn't been any study on it, but the policy has not changed since July 2016 for the League of Women Voters of the US. And so that's one thing nice about the League of Women Voters. If you think something needs to be revised, or if you think something needs to be changed, you can be a part of a study. And you can add more get more information added or deleted or changed. And that's what League of Women Voters is trying to get information out and trying to make people more aware of what is going on. Well, thank you for letting me share some information with you. And that's all I have, if there's no more questions.
Thank you so much, Elayne, for all your work. You are so organized and so complete. And it gives us a good basis for, you know, making our own decisions about what we might want to contact our legislators about. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Elayne. That was very informative.
Learned a lot.
Welcome.
Learned a lot.
And thank you for your questions. That always adds, because there's just more and more information all the time.